Welcome. My name is Mira Blaustein. I'm the co-founder and executive director of the Woodstock Film Festival, now in its 21st year. And for those of you who don't know that yet, ever since we had to close our office back in mid-March, we immediately began all this online programming. And we've had a lot of really great speakers, and we will continue having a lot of really great speakers. But tonight you're in for a real treat, because we have someone who about 10 or 11 years ago, the Woodstock Film Festival honored in an honorary Trailblazer Award, Ted Hope. He was then a New Yorker. He's now in the West Coast. Before we start talking to Ted, I just want to tell you a little bit about him. Ted has done so many things in his life. He didn't start at Amazon. He has had a number of production companies. He's produced so many great films. And now that he's in Amazon, he's shepherded award-winning films from Manchester by the Sea to Honey Boy, to so many great films. And we have him here. He's working remotely like all of us. So we're talking to him in his home in California. Hello, Ted.
Hey, Mara, how are you?
Drinking there?
That's just coffee. It's
okay.
Still work hours, 4 p.m. coffee in LA. So
thank you for taking the time to join us. I'm very happy to have you. It's been a while since I've seen you. You have gone through a number of transformations, or not transformations, but different career path during the last 10 years or so. But you've always been a producer. You've always been the kind of person who shepherded really good films.
I identify as a producer.
Yes. And I have a general question to the producer in you. And that is something that I think all of us want to know the secret formula to. You get presented, you get pitched a lot of projects. What is it about, whether it's an idea, a script, a package, that when you look at it, tells you there's something special here, this is what I want to put my attention into, and this is what I want to help shepherd. This is going to be a good film that I'll be proud of, and it will be a commercial success. Is there some sort of a secret formula that, how do you evaluate projects?
I think I do take a personal approach first. So I'm not so much like market based. In a place like Amazon, when anyone that is employed as opposed to self-employed, does have certain business mandates they're trying to fill and address. But on a much more personal level, the first question is, how do I feel? What kind of response does it elicit in me? And I think that there's a handful of things immediately that we look for. Like, I'm asking myself, am I going to be as excited about unlocking the mysteries that are contained within 3 to 5 years down the road as I am at this moment, right? So like a longevity, like question, like almost like a relationship, you have to look at the movie and interrogate it. Is there enough to keep you hungry for a long time and, prying within to unlock those pleasures? And for me, that often comes down to, I'm a very thematic based individual. I look for the what is in this, whether it's a design for living or a overall philosophy that my team at Amazon sometimes teases me that I get fixated on certain themes, and I'm starting to see it. Like, I very much like stories where it's about me seeing you and you seeing me. When do we know that we're actually recognized? How do we find our authentic self? I like stories a bit about that. I like questions about the transformative power of love. I like that as a theme in movies. Really, what I'm getting at is I'm looking at something that is going to keep me leaning forward, engaged with the film, my mind spinning, my emotions stimulated, and I know that when it's over, I'm going to be compelled to talk about it with my friends that I've seen it with, right? Like I want to be heavily engaged and get a bit of a workout, whether it's emotional, intellectual, or visceral. I want like that to come from it. And you often feel that right off the bat with the filmmaker, right? Like it's really curious to me, in say a pitch that someone gives, or just call it a conversation when somebody isn't really engaged around their work. So like when somebody is selling or reciting, I don't really believe it's a movie that's going to sustain them for 3 to 5 years, let alone me. What I'm looking for is somebody that is charged up about what they're talking about, and that you can see they're thinking about it on so many different levels, because it is that recognition that cinema is sound and vision and time, hearts and minds, and really a physical experience, and that belief that if we do our jobs well, it's going to change the world, the audience, the state of the business. Like that's the goal. Yeah. So I'm really looking for something at that level. Like I really do believe that, we are at the best place we've ever been for the production of ambitious culture. The audience is more sophisticated. We can make movies in a way we've never made them before. We can reach audiences in a way we've never reached them before. And there's a dialogue that's afoot because of also social media that goes back and forth that advances the conversation far faster. Like all of that is super exciting. So I expect those that I'm going to collaborate with are going to feel that excitement too.
That was really wonderful and illuminating. And before I go to questions by the attendees, and I just want to tell our attendees, we have some questions coming from Facebook Live, but all of you on Zoom also feel free to use the Q&A thing at the bottom of your screen here and write in your question. I will try to get to as many as possible. Before I get to questions from the attendees though, I wonder if you can take what you just spoke about so eloquently and with so much detail and apply that to one particular film that you have recently worked on. And I mean, just do it like a brief case study. I mean, whether it's Manchester by the Sea or any of the films that you have personally helped bring to fruition. And if you can talk about that, well, what in that particular film did it for you?
Well, first, just because it's like, just to kind of share like two things that you can't see yet because we're still working on them, but like how excited I am to get to work on them. And this is, like across the board, I think the filmmakers we're working with know that I get really ramped up in both the script stage and the editorial stage. And where, well, actually one we haven't announced, so I can't actually talk about it. So to talk about like I'm so excited right now for the next film by Leos Carax, right? Like we had the good fortune of being able to get to work with him. And this is a project I've wanted to do since I came to Amazon, literally 5 years ago. And for a variety of reasons, it was very difficult for it to get put together. We weren't going to fund it in full. It is a French production, although it's in English. And it is starring Adam Driver and Marion Cotillard. And the band Sparks wrote the script in music. It's a musical, but it's like nothing else you've ever seen before. So granted, he's a, you know, if you saw Holy Motors or Lovers on the Bridge, you know that he's a master
Yeah. Okay.
filmmaker.
Very much.
But the language of cinema is so alive at every turn. As somebody who like keeps like little tricks, like likes to track, you know, different things people do. You know, I'm a student of cinema. I'm learning watching the movie. I can't believe he pulled off something. So there's no shortage of those cinematic delights. And the film is both about, I would argue, the transformative power of art and love, you know, very much on that. How easy it is to get lost on the road of that thing. If you embrace the growth and the change that, say, love brings, how it will start to inform the things you do, which sometimes you might resist. So, you know, sometimes be careful what you wish for, because it can lead you down another road. And it's also very much, you know, about cinema and performance. It's a performative movie that embraces the illusion, but gives it a real world context. It's so like, it's so full of ideas and so personal, yet, you know, incredibly accessible. So I'm like sparked by it. And I would, you know, if I had my druthers, I would love to like just keep working on this movie for a couple of years, because it excites me so much. And, you know, we probably would have released it at Cannes if there was a Cannes this year, but I hope to bring it out to everybody in the fall. You know, movie like Cold War, you know, again, this is a film that is about the weight of love. It's not always a positive thing. That this is a story of two people who really shouldn't want to be together, but need each other desperately, you know, and it destroys their life and their romance and relationship. But it's a fire that they can't resist. And you know, again, Pavel is someone that's so in control of his own distinct cinema language, you know, that for me as a collaborator, it's super exciting, because like there's thoughts that I had when watching the edit of the film, and he shot it in sequence, which is a very unique way to shoot it, and an incredible luxury. But it also allowed for me to watch the film evolve. Like the first cut was just the first 45 minutes of the movie, and then it continued. So, and the language being very specific, you could say, oh, I wish this existed, and they could get that. And we were able, you know, it's a film that was built through the traditional international sales and international subsidy system, as well as our money from Amazon. But it meant that we were, you know, like one of the unique attributes of Amazon is we have a lot of capital. And so we were able to help them in the process achieve Pavel's goals, you know, with the film in a way that sometimes the financing structure of so many different partners prohibits. You know, you spend all your money, you maximize, and yet you're still reaching. And we could see that there was value in getting it, and it wasn't expensive, but we were able to move and make it happen. So that, you know, it's really, I think that question of how do you relate to the filmmaker on the filmmaker's terms and understand intimately what they're going for, even sometimes in a way they themselves may not fully articulate because of the nature of creative work, and be able to give the encouragement for them to reach, yet know that there's a discipline still that has to be executed, particularly when you're trying to make such ambitious cinema. You have budgetary confines, and how do you allow them to keep reaching? And I'm certainly super pleased, like both those films are places that Amazon was able to advance the movie in accordance with the filmmaker's wishes. And yet there was a very complicated financial structure that I think would have held other people back, you know.
Thank you. And he's lucky to have you guys. So, and vice versa.
You're lucky to have them and to be in those situations.
So we have a lot of questions, and I'm going to try to get as many as I can. And these are questions that span the gamut. So we have a question here from Sarah Pirozek, who's a filmmaker. And this is really in relation to what we're all going through now. And so she's asking, what is the future for independent film? Smaller budget films with new talent aren't getting funded as they used to and rarely get decent distribution. But is there a new opportunity for independent filmmakers and storytellers to get into episodic, or do you think films as we know them, independent films, will die out and longer form, the episodics, will be the ones that take over?
I'm really glad that none of us have crystal balls, right? Because I think some of the best things that I've been able to witness and some of the successes of great successes of movies, that I've heard the artists behind them say to me, if I only knew then what I know now, I never would have made that film, right? So don't worry about what may come in the future. Worry about what you want to tell and how you want to tell it. But I think that what's one of the nuggets within that story is we've all been trapped by a limited number of business models, which is rapidly expanding. So, basically people previously, had to make an early decision, were they choosing a feature film or a ongoing series, or maybe for different blips along the historical spectrum, there were times where you can make a limited series too. Being someone that is obsessed with having a beginning, middle, and end that I can comprehend in a single seating, I'm very feature film form oriented. I think that, COVID in particular is going to lead to some big changes, both short term and long term,
yes,
or accelerations of different phenomenon. But, I do believe that there is a magnificent art form that very much requires a large screen theatrical experience and a social interaction, with it as it unspools with the audience and soon thereafter. I think we've all been trapped for being stuck in a theatrical exhibition format that was designed 125 years ago, that doesn't really take into account what kind of, for lack of a better term, return on the investment of our engagement is expected in today's society. It's like our cities. Our cities, as exciting as they are designed for an era long past us. And, so how do you, it doesn't feel good to be a human to live in an entirely efficient environment. I don't think anyone wants that from our cities or from our theaters, but we do want something that celebrates us being alive, which is messy and tantalizing and seductive and loud and abrasive at times and incredibly quiet and intimate at other times. And I think that thinking about that, what are the unique attributes of the work that I'm making, that the cinema that I'm delivering, starts to bring us to different results or different answers than what we've been forced to subscribe to previously. And I think that this moment of transformative change is going to allow for some brave actors to take advantage of that. And I think one of them, also embedded in that question, is that the first films to happen will be those that are able to embrace a most intimate way of working, a small footprint, a small crew, in a manageable environment.
Yeah.
And when we come out of this, we are going to be very hungry for new things. That I would love nothing more than for all of us to try to embrace, how do we watch a great movie every day for the next 3 months of self-isolation, and thus raise the bar for cinema. Because let's face it, one of the challenges of our lifelong obsession with the new is almost a fetishization of mediocrity, that we prefer new over ultimate quality. But if we delve deep into our cinema history, we are going to raise the bar. We're going to start to demand a higher level of quality. So I like to think when we come out of this, we will be demanding greater work that speaks to us across the range of our senses and our engagement with community, and something new that captures us. And I think that we've never before, you could say in terms of war perhaps, but we've never before had such a community unifier, something that touches all of us in very similar ways, as this. And I think that there will be a few artists that don't rely on this experience, but are able to give a bottle to the wine that helps us understand it a little bit more, and makes us have that shock of recognition that it is so moving when we understand we are feeling something, and that person over there and that person over there is also feeling that thing. Yeah. So I think that we're going to see a few artists who know how to go out there, get this incredibly emotionally true and probably emotionally raw experience, capture that on camera and speak to all of us, because that moment, like never before, it was only this year, really, like you could say, okay, Netflix has been doing this for 2 years, but really now the ability to have a simultaneous global release and not have to be a franchise or a blockbuster tentpole family film. A small film could reach audiences across the globe, and through social media and different things like this, have a conversation. And that kind of, niche appeal on a grand scale, could really unlock something that could become something else, and then something else, and then something else, and really change culture. So I'm optimistic that for all the challenges that will come forth, because usually what happens in a disaster like this, which could have been prevented with better leadership, what comes across is usually the big get stronger. But I do think that the tools are in place, that intense emotional tales from the margins could have incredible impact.
Thank you. Ted, we have a lot of questions here. So
I don't have short answers, as you see.
I can see that, but it's wonderful to hear. I mean, you speak with passion, you speak with a lot of knowledge and experience, and it's really enlightening and educational. And hopefully, I think it's inspiring for me, and hopefully it's inspiring for all of you out there. I have a question here from Janet Grillo, who is a filmmaker, currently I believe in LA, but usually in New York. And she says, "Hi, Ted," and very inspiring and motivating. And she is asking, since you have access to high-level international filmmakers, and you've spoken about that actually before, and significant funding, is there still room on your production roster for the low-budget films with less established filmmakers, or is that mostly just saved for acquisitions while productions are for the high-level type stuff?
First, I should just point out, since, in many ways, I owe my career to Janet Grillo.
Oh, wow.
So not only did she hire me for what I think was the first paid script reading gig I got, and the first time she got to pay somebody to do it, She introduced me to my business partner, James Seamus. She was like, she gets goals, and there's other things she also helped me with personally in my life. So I owe
Janet
Janet
really helped me too. So we both love Janet.
a good egg, as they are. You know, Amazon has been very aggressive in the kind of more emerging filmmaker world. By all means, like, we're doing that in a robust and exciting way. I think that people have seen the beginning fruits of that with Blow the Man Down, first-time filmmakers, Sell in the Spades, first-time filmmaker, soon to hit Drive-ins Everywhere, The Vast of Night, first-time filmmaker, and then a very you know, aggressive program of more genre-oriented films, you know, both in the thriller space and in the young adult world, again, with underrepresented directors, you know, across the spectrum, really trying to bring those voices out. Those films have been done on a lower budgeted realm, you know, but what's happening here? I'm getting a call. Is that me?
That's
Hold
your
on.
phone, it's not me.
Hold on 1 second. I'll find it.
I don't think it's me. Okay. I think it's done. You got it under control.
I got it.
Okay, let's carry on.
You know, so by all means, we're doing that, and I think that one of the exciting things that is happening everywhere right now is that you can say that and this is, you know, my opinion, it's not a corporate opinion, what streaming has brought to the world, this phenomenon of instantaneous access to everything wherever you are and however you want it, is a increased media literacy by the audience, that you know, they have seen a ton of work, and they recognize very quickly that a lot of movies are the same. They, you know, that they are very similar stories, and for 125 years, basically those stories were told from the perspective of straight white men. And actually, they're great stories that can be told from other perspectives too. And you know what? They feel much fresher, you know, when they're not told in those shoes. Everybody was asked, this is a, I'm not going to use it. I was going to steal a line of a friend of mine that I like a lot. But like, we've all been asked to identify with that common hero. And I think it gets stale, and people start looking for fresh perspectives. And what's remarkable about that is, like, in the business side of things, people are looking to expand their audiences. So they're looking to access those folks who weren't served before. You know, when I got my start making movies with James Seamus and Christine Vachon and other people in the New York indie scene, we all kind of had the same realization that if you weren't going to make Hollywood movies, you still had to make movies for audiences. And what was not being addressed was the underserved. And how did you find what those audiences were? You just looked and saw if they had a parade, you know, or a bulletin board somewhere that you could reach them. I think that's an appropriation of Christine Vachon's line. So I can't help but steal my friend's lines. But like, if they had a parade, you could make a movie for them. Maybe it was James, somebody else. I give each of them credit. And I think that's happening in a much bigger context now in global streaming, that they have effectively secured two sides, three sides of the audience, but now they're looking into all of the different pockets and niches, and how do they provide for them. So they're very hungry to find people who can tell stories from different perspectives to help address that.
Thank you very much.
That's a history of cinema and the history of culture, right?
Yes,
They,
Absolutely.
they start with the people who are easiest to reach and address, and then they expand elsewhere.
I have a question here from Kevin Wang, who's asking you to address younger producers and asking if you could talk a bit about your earlier career stage, particularly your collaboration with James Schamus and Ang Lee. How did it begin? How was the experience? And he says, etc., which I would just interpret as if you can just dig a little bit further into that.
Sure, and I would encourage Kevin to go buy my book, Hope for Film, which does provide more information on that than I can provide, and was precisely why I wrote it. I think that like the first thing is, the reality is you have to figure out how to survive, right? So I think there's basically two paths to that, and that is to learn how to live small. Be really thankful for your standard issue gray T-shirt, and even after certain successes I've had, I've been trying to. My house gets smaller and smaller with every move I make, because I don't want to be dependent on anything like earning an income. I want to be free to work with the artists that I want to work with. So keep your appetite down, and then find a way to make sure, whether it's a side hustle gig or other ways that you can make money, that things to come in. And for me, like that was working production, being a assistant director, line producer, and then when we started Good Machine, doing some work for hire, along the way. And that was really key. I think that the challenge in what people seem to struggle with is that mixture of commitment and ambition, right? That when you find a filmmaker you want to work with, you have to be able to recognize that you are going to work with them for several years, failure or success, thick or thin, like a marriage. You may not get the movies made, but you have to stay with them, right? And how are you going to articulate that, and how are you going to do that? Because one is just the sheer economics of it. The other is the emotional, creative collaboration. You have to keep lifting them, and you have to keep believing in them, in their work. And that's a hard sort of thing to do. You are going to have dinner with them on a regular basis, and need to feel like it's fresh to have conversations about different things, and how you then will apply that to your art and business. I think that thinking both big and small, thinking both practically and the dream are easy ways to do that. I have a way of working. I'm going to change the angle. I have a way of working that works well for me, and I think it can be applicable to others. And one day I'll get around to writing the book on this, because there's definitely a book in it. But that is, I think that first, it's really important as a artist, and I believe producers are artists too, you have to define what you love in cinema, right? And that's I didn't really try to do that until I had already been making movies for 20 years. And then it took me about 2.5 years to try to successfully get to a place where I thought I was complete. And then subsequently, I've added on to that. Defining the qualities that lift what is good into what is great, right? When I first did it, my list was 32 things, and that were transformative in that way. And you can find that on the internet, that it was on my Hope for Film blog, 32 Qualities of Better Film. The thing I found interesting was 32 was coincidental. I just kept working till I was done. But that's the same experiment that both Bach and Beethoven did of how do you take something mediocre and make it magnificent. They did 32 variations, and that I think now I have 40, but there's art, could be repetitive. But that was the first thing. And what that really did for me was it gave me a way to, like, when you read a script and, you have some inspiration, some things you feel aren't working, but you're still like, why isn't this working better for me? You can start to use that as a checklist. And I found I could do the same thing when I was on set, watching something. Why is this scene not working for me? And I could go through those things. And I found I could do that same thing in post, or even after I saw a movie. Why didn't it work better for me? And I could look at those things. And that process also made me keep looking for other such definitions. So that would be step one, define what you love. Step 2, 3, 4 would be to also try to look at the world, the cultural tendencies of the times that you're living in. What are those? Those things are always shifting, but defining it makes you help you recognize whether you're making something culturally relevant or not. Personally, I think you want to then also look at your values. What do you care most about? And what are those things? And trying to define those, because those would tell you where you want to make movies too. And it also will allow you to project your character easier and quicker when you meet people and you start collaborating, because ultimately they're trying to evaluate, can they trust you? Can they build enough confidence in you to allow you to help shepherd their project forward? You need to learn how to actually have a performative quality that gives them the clues to who you really are deep down inside, so that they can have that deeper relationship with you to, parent their child, right? Then I think you also want to look at it in the industry. What are these defining characteristics of this time in the film business that we all live in? Because that's going to show you the paths that allow you to get your movie made. Because you're going to run into wall after wall after wall, and you have to decide, this one I'm climbing over, this one I'm digging under, this one I'm going to try to walk around, and this one we're just going to have to force our way through it, right? But you have to know what those are in advance, so you can have the hope of getting through it, right? And then I think you always are looking for the potential for innovation in all those fields. And so that requires you to know the history of your craft. It requires you to know the technology and tools of your craft. It requires you to look at it on a cultural realm. Where is the world going to politically, economically, socially, and in the playthings and tools that we have to our side. So you can start to bring those, into play, so you can advance the language in the conversation. So it's really just 4 simple things you have to be mindful of at all times. And generally, if you work on that list, I think you'll find that each of them probably contain 40. So 160 different things you have to be thinking of at all times.
At all times, okay. I'm going to ask you, I'm going to go to a question here that really pivots the conversation, but also really take us, and I know you didn't want us to talk that much about the future, but I do think that everybody is actually thinking a lot about the future. So Kira Benzing, who is a virtual reality filmmaker, is asking, what do you think about using virtual reality to gather future cinema audiences? And Amazon and even a Woodstock cinema in VR, where these great films and Q&As and conversation can still happen. Could that be a future that you can envision?
I find it all pretty fascinating. I've been able to do a little, playing around and exploration and different things that are out there, and feel lucky to have that. But to me, like the challenge of, say, like the garden of earthly delights is that if you try to make each stop along the way, you're never going to have great knowledge of really the taste of a pear or the texture of you know cheese, let's say, or the bread that's in front of you. And I made a decision myself to like, I love movies so much. I know they're growing antiquated, and I'm going to stay in that art form. Like that's the place I want to dwell. And there will be kind of times that I have diversions for sure. I think that happens, but I know so little outside of having seen the things that I was told are the leading, lights in that field. I don't feel qualified to discuss the potential at all there. And although, yeah, so I'm going to refrain from going. I think that the fact is every generation wants something that's theirs. They want to be able to tell it in the style that's theirs. And they want it to reach more of their own. I did expect VR and AR to expand much faster than they did. I was really hungry and ready, when transmedia, what was a buzzword and phrase of, really looking at trying to do storytelling across multiple platforms that, felt natural and native to each of those platforms. And it's incredibly surprising to me how slow those things take on. I think, again, we just have so many different things that are competing for our attention, for our leisure time. And we've unfortunately encouraged people to become experts as opposed to amateurs. So I think that people, like I see in a lot of younger people, they have incredible depth of knowledge in a really single field of exploration. And they become uncomfortable when they travel outside that level of expertise, And so it's hard to say like, well, I like wine, cheese, chocolate, sushi, French cooking, Portuguese cooking, Chinese cooking of at least 6 of the cuisines. And I like, movies, video games, music, people become like obsessed with having categorical knowledge. At least I find many people do, as opposed to that widespread. And I think that's one of the reasons why good ideas spread slower than they do. When I arrived at Amazon 5 years ago, I thought we had 6 months before Disney, Apple, and other studios caught up to us. And 5 years later, they've launched, but they haven't yet caught up. Like, I didn't understand why it was moving so slowly. And I still don't. But I think that you can look at corporations and you can look at audiences and be surprised at how hard it is to make change in their practices. But the one thing that I have found is I do think artists in particular, but audiences too, move faster than the business or the markets, and sometimes that can be really advantageous to business or to a particular artist. But it's actually you have to recognize that the industry, the business, is multiple people doing the same thing at a consistent level with a regular cadence in a environment that audiences trust and are compelled to participate in. And unless that all happens, like how many different variables go into that equation, unless all of that happens, you're not going to have transformative change.
Well, okay. Thank you. I'm going to ask a couple more questions. We have a lot, but time is marching on. I have a question here from Jen Applegate, who's a producer. And she's asking, what is the best way for independent filmmakers with powerful scripts to pitch them to a team? Is the best way to go through an agent or attorney to represent the project, or what? From your judging from your experience as someone who's who's looking at projects, what's the best way to?
You have to be an octopus that has a warm embrace in many cookie jars, as it were. In that, really, part of your job is to build relationships and to mature with those relationships over time. Janet Grillo, the first question, ran the story department at New Line Cinema when I was in the mailroom there and inspecting 16 millimeter prints. You know, you want to maintain something for a long time, you know, and empower those that are around you to grow and, you know, reach their heights, because one day they might be the head of a studio or a streaming company, you know, and you are going to enjoy that relationship, you know, in a privileged way. People make the mistake of believing the only way they're going to get their movie made is to talk to the boss. And the reality is, you want to find the people that are vested in championing you and championing your work, right, along the way. And then, by all means, what's great about an agent and having one, but it's not needed, but what's great about it is it demonstrates that somebody thinks of business in you, right? That's really like what it signifies. And it's not the only way that can be done, but that's a, you know, clear way. Now, we already get, you know, somewhere between 40 and 80 projects a week that are coming in, you know, of new material. When we had a open forum, Amazon used to have a way that anyone could submit, whether it was represented or not. The numbers were colossal, right? You go through all this, you find very few needles in a haystack, you know, diamonds in the rough, is the unfortunate truth. And agents, you know, work, you know, meticulously to find the things that they think have value in the marketplace. So they work as a really great filter. Film festivals work the same way. A lot of like different competitions work the same way. Producers work the same way. So there's many additional options, and they all, you know, verify that someone believes it, you know, like they worked hard to find this gem and they want to champion it, right? One of the things that has kind of shocked me, being in the seat of a buyer, you know, I spent most of my career as a seller, right, is the lack of preparation that is done for a pitch, right? That, to me, that is, you know, one, it's not a great way to start a relationship, because it's a question of how much you are showing respect for somebody else's time, right? You know, that none of us have. That's what's the commodity we have in the most shortest supply is time. And so when you come to a meeting and you aren't truly prepared, or you walk away and I know you could have done more, I'm like, who do they think they are, right?
Yeah.
The industry itself, I think, lacks in quality support to help people prepare for those opportunities. Because when you go into a studio, you know, you could essentially, you know, walk out with 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 million dollars, right? You should really prepare for that opportunity. It's more important than your college interview or your, you know, how you're going to ask someone to marry you, or buying a dog. And yet we do so much research and homework for all those things. There's many different ways that things can be done as a pitch, and you want to find the one that works best for you. And that's going to mean that you're going to try many on that don't look good on you, right? You have to be willing to wear that outfit and say, God, that was a mistake, right? There's going to be profound embarrassment getting to the point where you know how to deliver your pitch best, right? To me, there's many things that you can think through that that show there's room for innovation. Because when you think through the goal, how do you want to leave somebody at the end of the room? You want them thinking about your work, and you want them believing that you are the one that is going to be able to execute that well, and that they aren't going to be ashamed for taking a chance on you. And so to me, like, that's a question of like, who do you want around you in the room? What additional materials do you want to use? How do you want to deliver it? How does it relate to your script that might already be in place, or the materials that you can leave with them? How do you keep people thinking about it, and how do you want to follow up thereafter? And then recognize that most likely this pitch isn't about that project. It's about 2 or 3 down the road, right? You want them to hear your pitch, and be excited about it. But everyone has limited bandwidth, right? Netflix might be making 80 movies, but nobody else is, so they generally aren't going to be able to say, yes, because they have limited bandwidth, but they are going to want to make space for you later if you do well, or the thing that they've already chosen to do, they might call you in on, right? And the benefit of that is, as you develop those relationships and do more and more of those pitches, you're going to grow more and more comfortable with those people in the room, and they're going to grow more comfortable. And at a certain time, it's like the equivalent of the 3rd date or the 5th date or whatever the correct numbers are, that they're going to deliver for you.
Thank you. I think that you spoke about almost all phases of creativity, from the how to make a good film, how to get attention to it, how to get it, how to pitch, and then how to bring it to the world. So I'm going to begin to wind this down, and I'm going to ask you a question that is very specific. And that is an anonymous attendee is asking. Actually, that's not true. I'm sorry. Felicia Salvatore is asking, what film would you say touched you the most, that you either have worked on or have seen, one that has really stuck with you? And I think that after everything that you spoke about, how, what makes a good film, and how to bring a good film into the world, and how to get noticed, the crux of it is, perhaps you can just take one of the films that has touched you, and what was it? What was it about that film that did it for you?
Well, there was definitely a handful I could talk about, but to me, in a lot of ways, I would say "In the Mood for Love" by Wong Kar-wai. He was a filmmaker who I'd been watching his work evolve. I'd been at the first screening in America of Days of Being Wild at New Directors. I tried to talk to him there. I'd gone to see his movies in Chinatown in New York in a theater where they first played before they got to the art house in America. I'd been tracking him, but it did not prepare me for what I felt was just such a unique and distinct film. And it was delivered with such emotion and heartbreak. And, everything is serving that theme. The design of the film, the way it's shot, the use of music, the way it's edited, how it plays with time, speaks of, to me, I would say what is the ultimate cosmic joke is you could have tremendous love for somebody and they could have it for you, and it's just not going to work out. This thing that feels like such a defining element of humanity, like should be able to exist, but it doesn't, right? Now, of course, that's like a perfect theme, worked for Shakespeare, Romeo and Juliet. It's worked through many different stories and movies and books. But it felt entirely fresh, in that tale. And, it felt to me like a example of cinema. Like my favorite types of movies are things that use all aspects of cinema, so it completely delivered. There's films that I've got to be involved with and work on that also feel to me sometimes like able to do that, that are able to display a theme that is universal to us, but in a manner that feels entirely fresh. And often you have that ambition for a film and it falls short, and sometimes it actually exceeds. So when I was curious, I was thinking about the movie American Splendor, a film that I produced, and it was coming right after 9/11. We had been greenlit, and we were going to, I think, like we was planning to shoot so that we could finish before the December holidays. So it was a really tough decision to go forward with it right after 9/11. And of course, I was thinking about this recently because of like, what are the first post-COVID movies, and I was reluctant, and it was Bob Puccini and Sherry Springer Berman, the directors of the film, who really, said to me, no, we have to go forward and, and do it. And I think that one of the things that it really did, everybody on that show was particularly excited to be, it was a ambitious film that was playing with form, and everybody on the show was thankful to be there. And it was about really a truly everyday hero, somebody who was like any of us, and perhaps more troubled than most, but found a way to express themselves in a uniquely singular way. And the movie captured that, and captured both the everyday, every person element of it, but also the unique distinction and individuality, and how much he was a person of his world and community. And I think like that experience of making that film at that particular time infused it into the movie, so I hope like that's something that this time we'll see numerous examples of too, of people that capture that.
Thank you.
I know I said I had to finish at 8 p.m., but I can go a little bit longer.
Okay, well, that's wonderful. So I'm going to take, I see the questions, a lot of questions about pitching. So I'm going to combine, we have a lot of filmmakers attending here. So both Julia Verdin and Nick Yakov are asking basically the same question. And that is, one is, what do you expect from a good pitch? And if you can get more into detail, what makes a good pitch?
Well, I think the answer to that question asks really like, what's the result that you want? That sometimes a pitch is actually used to just have someone read the script, and sometimes it's to fund a script, and sometimes it's to fund the movie, and those all have different nuances. But I think like the commonality there is that you're going to want to leave them wanting more, because the pitch is a sales tool, right? And selling is about the moment of greatest anticipation, highest expectation, right? So that's when you can sell in the best possible manner. So really that is what a pitch is about, is to create that expectation, and then to that I really enjoyed being there, and I believe that they're going to take it even further. So how do you create that mystique in it? you know? And I think the other thing about a pitch is, because assuming you are the filmmaker, it's a point where you can earn trust and confidence, right? You know, that these films are 3 year, you know, minimum relationship that is going to require people to risk their jobs, perhaps their livelihood, sometimes, you know, their own personal lives, in order to get it made and have the impact that we all desire. They're going to have to fight for it. So you're really asking, like, am I comfortable about, you know, fighting for this person, having this person in my corner, all those things. So you're not going to answer that question in the pitch, but you're going to give people a feeling, you know, of what their expectation might be, and then you're going to do the dance to kind of figure out how accurate it was. But so engagement is a big thing. You want to get everybody to be leaning in and to be, you know, and wanting to hear the words. So I think it's super effective when somebody can do it off book. When someone has to read, they're creating a distance of it. And, you know, I go back to, one of my first film industry public speaking moments, you know, which was with James Seamus, and we were getting an award from Film Independent, and first award we ever got, you know, for being indie producers. And James had, the gentleman that he is, had the courtesy to say, would you like me to speak first, or do you want to speak first? And I was like, oh, I'm going to speak first, because I'm going to fucking slay them and leave you in the dust. And so I wrote out some comments, and I basically read those comments and could feel the room getting cold and dying a fast death. Yeah. And then James came out, and he didn't have anything written down, and he just warmed everybody over, won their hearts and minds, and just, you know, slayed the room. And I was like, how the hell did you just do that? Now, if you've ever heard James speak, he's a very gifted public speaker. And he was just like, I remembered that they're all my friends, that I'm having a conversation, and I'm just trying to be myself. Right. And that was like the, you know, so I was like, and how do you do this? It's like, I don't write things. I'll know the points I want to hit, and I'll, you know, keep those in my mind. And I'm going to have that conversation. I'm not going to be worried if I miss a beat or two, or I don't give the tag, or any of those sorts of things. And I think that's also really true with a pitch, right? You know, like, you want to have done the work and the rehearsing of it, so you know what people respond to, but you don't have to do the whole story. You don't have to do all the nuance. You want to get them excited by your excitement, you know, and you want it to feel authentic in a way that builds trust, confidence, and a plan for the future. I do like, you know, I like cinema. So I want to understand how you're thinking about it visually. I want to hear how you're thinking about it in across time, editorially. I want to understand the style that it's derived from, its antecedents, precedents. You know, I want to really understand what I'm going to be left with at the end. You know, the thematic resonance of it, how I'm going to be feeling when the lights come up. So I'm going to be kind of tracking that, and then of course I'm also going to worry about how I sell this, both internally and externally, you know, to my team and to the audience. You know, so I'm going to be looking for those sorts of things. I don't necessarily expect the filmmaker to have all those answers, but I'm going to be looking for the nuggets that give me the expectation that I'll be able to do that.
Thank you. Do you have time for one more question, or shall we? Yeah. Okay, we'll make this last question.
9 minutes. 8 minutes left.
How many? Eight. Okay, so so this is from another producer, and it's I'm asking it because I have something to do with the issue, and he's saying, how do you think film festivals will or should change once they resume? And I would, for one, would love to hear your opinion about that.
Well, I did get to run a film society for 1 year that had a great film festival with lots of people completely devoted to it in San Francisco.
Yes.
Um, and I think that first it's the question of what type of film festival it is, from community to industry oriented, from market to celebration. I think it's really important that the festival have unique characteristics that they lean into, and I think that question of having identified what you are to your community, you know, gives you a lot of the path to the answer to that question. Because I would say that thing that you did that defined you as unique, you want to make sure that that's what's preserved first and foremost, right? Um, I'm scared. I'm terrified. I'm an old man. I'm worried I'm never going to see my mom again. She's on the other side of the country. I don't want to get sick. I don't want to give anybody, illness. Um, and yet, what I love about cinema, the theatrical exhibition, component, which festivals are part of, is being in that room where people are having the same response and they bump into you and you hear their laughter and you hear their coughs, and you're competing to get the better seat, the seat that you like best amongst all those people. And the temperature may be too hot or too cold, but you're all feeling it simultaneously, right? I love that. And I love talking about it afterwards. And I love being in the bar with other people who have seen the movie about it, the social component. And it's going to detract from it to go through the temperature check before I go into a screening. And it's going to detract if I have to be tested every day while I'm at the festival. And it's going to detract if we're doing checkerboard seating every other seat. But I do know that this art form and social tool that I love benefits fully from that experience. So I want to figure out, like, how do we preserve that? And particularly, I think, like, there's this thing that film festivals do so well, which verify why a risk is worth it for the perhaps somewhat timid individual. Why do I see that movie now, right? And then you hear, oh my God, you have to see that movie, and it's really not as shocking as you might think it really is. That word of mouth, that cultural embrace is so useful. We have to figure out how to preserve that, and the shared experience of the shock of the new. I love seeing movies before I've read reviews and how they work with me. How all that's preserved is so important. The answer is I just don't know, but I think that recognizing that the social piece is just as important as the film piece, and that they fulfill such a necessity in the ecosystem overall, and that they are all different, and you want to preserve that distinction, are some of the paths and answers to that.
Thank you very, very much. I grew up on going to cinematheques. I think a lot of us have. It's in our blood, and it's hopefully something that we'll be able to get back to. I think that this is a very good place to bring this to an end. This was an amazing conversation. I have to tell you the number of comments here just saying how great you are and what a great conversation this is, and how
great.
thankful they are for giving us your time, as am I. So I hope to see you at a film festival or at the Woodstock Film Festival. You're always invited.
You
And
know,
for those of you in the, our audience whose questions I wasn't able to get to, I'm sorry. You see, he gives a lot. Every time Ted answers a question, he gives a lot from his heart and soul. So it takes time.
yeah, and I would say, like, you know, hopefully this conversation isn't over. You know, like, I used to blog, you know, to try to address these things. I don't do that currently, but I do use both Twitter and my Facebook page. There's a what they call a fan page that I can find just to film discussion. And though in the COVID time, I just haven't had the ability to focus and address that. Um, you know, if people pose questions to me on Twitter, I will try to get to answer them. And then I tend to do the long winded piece on Facebook. And I get a great deal out of the answers that other people supply too in that conversation. So, you know, a lot of this has come through, you know, group learning and the lift that we all get from that by trying to address the difficult questions of how do we manage this delicate balance between business and art that is what cinema really is, and between the creator, the artist, and the audience dialogue, you know, and then of course the transformative change that we're all in. We're all in it together. None of us have the answers, but the fact is we're having unique experiences that are actually reflected in each other and shared across each other, which is, I think, the basis for a lot of great art. So I expect that we're going to come out of this time, you know, with some of the best stuff any of us have ever experienced and seen. But it's going to become a truly collaborative effort that requires all of us to interrogate these questions, our values, our loves, our appreciations, you know, ask to raise the bar for each other. Like how do we do our best work now, you know, and basically be generous and compassionate to the fact that it's going to be a struggle for 99% of the people
Right.
out there. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you again, Ted. People are also making comment that they miss your blog, so get back to it at some point.
Yeah.
In the meantime, you guys, you heard you could go on his Facebook, his fan-based Facebook page, and he will share more thoughts and information. Stay in touch, do good work, stay safe. Say hello to your family, and to all of you, come back and join us next week. We are doing 2 talks. Ted, we are doing Unorthodox, which is not on Amazon but on Netflix. But we're talking with director Maria Schrader. She's in Germany.
She was one of the very first Good Machine films. She was the star of and one of the producers of, called I Was on Mars. Like, we did it simultaneously with Ang Lee's first film. Danny Levy directed it.
She's incredible.
Yeah.
So I'm very happy. I really can't wait to have her. And then we also have a panel called Today's Women in Film and Media. And we have Elisa Fedorov from Neon, and we have Deborah Granick, who's an incredible director. So it's going to be great. So those 2 are next week. Join us. And thank you again, Ted. Thank you guys all. Go have a good evening. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we'll see you on the web.
Hey, one quick question. You know, I don't know if there's a way to download the questions that didn't get answered, but if you are able to send those to me, I will endeavor, I don't make any promises, to try to answer them eventually on social media in one form or the other.
I'm going to try to do that. A lot of them are about Amazon. But I'm going to try to do that. I'm attempting as we speak, and we'll see if that works. And I'm also asking Zach, who is our man behind the curtain, so to speak, who's operating the Zoom for us, to see if he can make that. And I will get them to you if I can, okay? All right. Well, thank you again, everybody. Have a good night.
All righty.
We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.